Çatalhöyük is a tell of a very large Neolithic and Chalcolithic proto-city settlement in southern Anatolia, which existed from approximately 7500 BC to 6400 BC, and flourished around 7000 BC. In July 2012, it was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Çatalhöyük is located overlooking the Konya Plain, southeast of the present-day city of Konya, ancient Iconium, in Turkey, approximately 140 kilometers, 87 miles, from the twin cone volcano of Mount Hasan. The eastern settlement forms a mound that would have risen about 20 meters, 66 feet, above the plain at the time of the latest Neolithic occupation. There is also a smaller settlement mound to the west and a Byzantine settlement a few hundred meters to the east. The prehistoric mound settlements were abandoned before the Bronze Age. A channel of the Karsamba River once flowed between the two mounds, and the settlement was built on alluvial clay which may have been favorable for early agriculture. The site was first excavated by James Mellart in 1958. He later led a team which further excavated there for 4 seasons between 1961 and 1965. These excavations revealed this section of Anatolia as a center of advanced culture in the Neolithic period. Excavation revealed 18 successive layers of buildings signifying various stages of the settlement and eras of history. The bottom layer of buildings can be dated as early as 7100 BC while the top layer is from 5600 BC. Çatalhöyük was composed entirely of domestic buildings, with no obvious public buildings. While some of the larger ones have rather ornate murals, the purpose of some rooms remains unclear. The population of the eastern mound has been estimated to be around 10,000 people, but the population likely varied over the community's history. An average population of between 5,000 and 7,000 is a reasonable estimate. The sites were set up as large numbers of buildings clustered together. Households looked to their neighbors for help, trade, and possible marriage for their children. The inhabitants lived in mud brick houses that were crammed together in an aggregate structure. No footpaths or streets were used between the dwellings, which were clustered in a honeycomb-like maze. Most were accessed by holes in the ceiling and doors on the side of the houses, with doors reached by ladders and stairs. The rooftops were effectively streets. The ceiling openings also served as the only source of ventilation, allowing smoke from the house's open hearths and ovens to escape. Houses had plaster interiors characterized by squared-off timber ladders or steep stairs. These were usually on the south wall of the room, as were cooking hearths and ovens. The main rooms contained raised platforms that may have been used for a range of domestic activities. Typical houses contained 2 rooms for everyday activity, such as cooking and crafting. All interior walls and platforms were plastered to a smooth finish. Ancillary rooms were used as storage, and were accessed through low openings from main rooms. All rooms were kept scrupulously clean. Archaeologists identified very little rubbish in the buildings, finding middens outside the ruins, with sewage and food waste, as well as significant amounts of ash from burning wood, reeds and animal dung. In good weather, many daily activities may also have taken place on the rooftops, which may have formed a plaza. In later periods, large communal ovens appear to have been built on these rooftops. Over time, houses were renewed by partial demolition and rebuilding on a foundation of rubble, which was how the mound was gradually built up. As many as 18 levels of settlement have been uncovered. As a part of ritual life, the people of Çatalhöyük buried their dead within the village. Human remains have been found in pits beneath the floors and, especially, beneath hearths, the platforms within the main rooms, and under beds. Bodies were tightly flexed before burial and were often placed in baskets or wound and wrapped in reed mats. Disarticulated bones in some graves suggest that bodies may have been exposed in the open air for a time before the bones were gathered and buried. In some cases, graves were disturbed, and the individual's head removed from the skeleton. These heads may have been used in rituals, as some were found in other areas of the community. In a woman's grave, spinning whorls were recovered, and in a man's grave, stone axes. Some skulls were plastered and painted with ochre to recreate faces, a custom more characteristic of Neolithic sites in Syria and at Neolithic Jericho than at sites closer by. Vivid murals and figurines are found throughout the settlement, on interior and exterior walls. Distinctive clay figurines of women, notably the seated woman of Çatalhöyük, have been found in the upper levels of the site. Although no identifiable temples have been found, the graves, murals, and figurines suggest that the people of Çatalhöyük had a religion rich in symbols. Rooms with concentrations of these items may have been shrines or public meeting areas. Predominant images include men with erect phalluses, hunting scenes, red images of the now extinct aurochs, wild cattle, and stags, and vultures swooping down on headless figures. Relief figures are carved on walls, such as of lionesses facing one another. Heads of animals, especially of cattle, were mounted on walls. A painting of the village, with the twin mountain peaks of Hassan Dag in the background, is frequently cited as the world's oldest map, and the first landscape painting. However, some archaeologists question this interpretation. Stephanie Meese, for example, argues that it is more likely a painting of a leopard skin instead of a volcano, and a decorative geometric design instead of a map. Estonian folklorist Uku Masing has suggested as early as in 1976 that Çatalhöyük was probably a hunting and gathering religion and the mother goddess figurine did not represent a female deity. He implied that perhaps a longer period of time was needed to develop symbols for agricultural rites. His theory was developed in the paper, Some Remarks on the Mythology of the People of Çatalhöyük. Çatalhöyük has strong evidence of an egalitarian society, as no houses with distinctive features, belonging to royalty or religious hierarchy, for example, have been found so far. The most recent investigations also reveal little social distinction based on gender, with men and women receiving equivalent nutrition and seeming to have equal social status, as typically found in Paleolithic cultures. Children observed domestic areas. They learned how to perform rituals and how to build or repair houses by watching the adults make statues, beads and other objects. Çatalhöyük's spatial layout may be due to the close kin relations exhibited amongst the people. It can be seen, in the layout, that the people were divided into two groups who lived on opposite sides of the town, separated by a gully. Furthermore, because no nearby towns were found from which marriage partners could be drawn, this spatial separation must have marked two intermarrying kinship groups. This would help explain how a settlement so early on would become so large. Now let's examine the DNA of the Neolithic people of Çatalhöyük. The modern peoples genetically closest to the Neolithic Çatalhöyük peoples are the Sardinians, descendants of the Neolithic culture, a pre-Indo-European Bronze Age culture, and assimilated to Indo-European peoples, the Cycladic and Dodecanese Greeks, descendants of people of Neolithic Greece. And Yamnaya culture and the Samaritans descended from the ancient Israelites. Now let's look at the phenotypes of these people. The Neolithic people of Çatalhöyük had a Mediterranean appearance, like the Sardinians and Greeks. Let's take a look at who the Neolithic people of Çatalhöyük were, where they came from, and what groups they descended from today. The Neolithic people of Çatalhöyük are part of the Neolithic peoples and pre-pottery Neolithic B culture of pre-Indo-European Europe and formed the proto-city of Çatalhöyük in 7500 BC. They are the descendants of Natufian hunter-gatherers who lived 15,000–11,500 years ago, and the Natufian hunter-gatherers are descendants of Emiran hunter-gatherers who migrated from Africa to the Middle East 60,000 years ago. It is not known what language they speak. They probably spoke many different languages and switched from many languages to one. The Neolithic people of Çatalhöyük today have no direct descendants, but communities living in modern Anatolia, the Aegean Islands and the Fertile Crescent are partly descended from these people. As an extra piece of information, Neolithic Çatalhöyük people are one of the first groups of people to baking and eat bread, and their bread is as seen in this picture.